I have just accepted Her Majesty the Queen's kind invitation to form a new government.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's fantastic to be back.
In this new era, we're taking a new approach.
It will be uncensorable and uncancelable.
We can't give in to those who say we can't do better.
That is a disgrace.
We can make the West great again.
The status quo is not an option.
Welcome back to the Liz Truss Show. In the first episode, London is Falling, I talked about the dreadful state that Britain is in, the fact that we have a crisis of mass migration. We've got a huge problem with grooming gangs, rape gangs, essentially in parts of Britain that the government is trying to cover up. We've also got an economic crisis. People in Britain are poorer now than people in Mississippi, and they're struggling with the cost of living. Meanwhile, the government is racking up taxes and debts, and people are talking about Britain having to go to the IMF. It's a race really between Britain and France about who can get to the IMF first. So what on earth has happened in our country? Well, we've had years and years of decline, and we've had an establishment that hasn't just got along with that. They've almost accelerated the decline. Partly because of ideological reasons. We've got people who are essentially Marxists, who are Keynesians, who believe in the government spending money rather than the individual. We've had Islamists infiltrate parts of our state, whether that's police forces, the Home Office, elements of the Foreign Office. And we've also had the eco-zealots who pursued net zero like it's a religion, meaning that we've got some of the highest energy prices in the world. We're not doing fracking, even though there's huge amounts of gas in the British Isles that could be used. And that means that many of our industries no longer exist, whether it's the steel industry or the car industry. It also means that industries of the future, like AI, aren't able to get the energy they need. But what I want to talk to you about today is about how on earth do we change this situation? Some people say it's too far gone. We need to just write off Britain. Well, I can't write off Britain. It's my homeland. And it's a great country that's given great things to the world. Much of the American Constitution and institutions were actually developed, or the ideas behind them were developed in England. And I believe it's worth fighting for. But what we need in Britain is we need a Trump-style revolution. We need a MAGA revolution. So what I want to talk about today is how do we achieve that? Looking at some of the ways that the independent media was developed in America, the MAGA movement was developed, and of course the policies of the Trump administration were developed, in particular Project 2025, which has informed some of the flood the zone, the executive orders that we've seen emanating from the Oval Office. Britain's media is even more captured than organisations like CNN. I mean, the BBC has lied about virtually everything. It's lied about what's been going on in Israel. It's lied about my mini budget, but it's also lied about President Trump. And of course, President Trump is now suing the BBC, rightly, because of those lies. The problem is the BBC is funded by a poll tax on the British public. So they have vast reserves of money that they can use to churn out their propaganda. And the BBC has been captured by the left, not just the sort of moderate Democrat Labour left, by serious ideological nutjobs. People that believe that men can become women. There was a BBC presenter recently who was castigated for objecting to talking about pregnant people. She wanted to talk about pregnant women. I think we all know that only women can actually get pregnant, but the BBC doesn't agree with that. So we've got a very, very captured media. And it's not just the BBC, it's also organizations like the Times and the Financial Times that are very beholden to Britain's financial and economic institutions. They're all part of the corporate media class who live in London, who don't really have to face the problems that ordinary Britons have to face. They don't have a migrant hotel next door to their house. They don't have a climbing energy bill that they can't pay because they're getting their fat wad salaries from the corporate sector, from the media sector, or actually from the civil service. So these people are very insulated. So I don't underestimate how hard taking these people on is going to be. That is why I've set up the Liz Truss Show, because I want to help develop the independent media landscape. We've got great shows like the Peter McCormack Show. We've got a great show from Dan Wootton, but I believe we need more. We want to get up to the level of having Joe Rogan, Just the News, Megyn Kelly. We need a whole cornucopia of independent media in Britain to take on the corporate media. What we also need is we need people who are prepared to join us in this fight. One of the big successes of Trump 2024 and 2025 has been bringing in people like Elon Musk, like Scott Bessent. Lots of people from Silicon Valley are now serving at all kinds of levels in the administration. They're putting the shoulders to the wheel, and we need to identify people like that in Britain, because the problem is not just going to be solved by putting somebody new in number 10 Downing Street. We actually need to find people who are prepared to get things done in the Treasury, in the Home Office, in the police forces. These are the people we are going to need on the ground to really be making a difference to what's happening. We also need to have a clear plan of action. Project 2025 was developed in various think tanks, various organizations. It comprised both the legislation and much of the personnel that is now part of the Trump administration. And likewise in Britain, we need to think about how is that legislation going to be written and how tough does it have to be? Now, having been there and having faced the brickbats and the briefing, unauthorized briefing from bureaucrats, I know that it has to go very deep. And that is one of the things that we will need to achieve in Britain. So it's a massive task ahead of us. We can't underestimate the fact that the leftists are very well funded. We can't underestimate the fact that they hold all the positions of power, and that London has become a haven for the globalist left. In fact, some of them are leaving America and coming to London and making our problem even worse. So something America could do to help us is take some of these people back into their own country. We also need a movement of people. Many people suggest that the Trump revolution and the Brexit revolution happened together. Back in 2016, there were two major votes. And the people who were part of the Brexit movement, people who wanted to put two fingers up to Brussels as well as London, I believe form the base for what is going to be the next British counter-revolution. These are people who are living in towns outside London who've seen their industries closed down. It's farmers who are frustrated that Keir Starmer is putting more taxes on them and denuding them of their inheritance, and also denuding our country of people who actually produce food, which is pretty important. We also need to galvanize the Bitcoiners and the crypto community in Britain, people who want to have independence in their financial assets. They don't want to be subject to the whims of the governor of the Bank of England and the fiat currencies and the potentially the CBDCs that the establishment want to introduce, which would obviously mean that your money could be tracked and you might be able to be prevented from paying for particular goods or particular services. So to me, there are a whole group of people in Britain who are intensely frustrated, and Keir Starmer is the most unpopular prime minister in British history. The Labour Party are at 15% in the polls, and people are turning to alternatives. So clearly there's a frustration there. But one of the things I feel is there is still mainly because of the media not telling the truth, there is still a lack of understanding about where the problems really are and how deep the problems are. You know, the British deep state goes deeper than virtually any other in the world. It was in 1854 under Northcote Trevelyan that the permanent civil service was put in place. And since then, it has grown like Topsy. And it's been more and more empowered. And particularly Tony Blair turbocharged it. He put in more unelected bodies. He, rather than the judiciary being appointed by the Lord Chancellor, who's appointed by the Prime Minister, instead, he made it subject to a committee which was run by the judges themselves. So what we've seen is the government of our country taken over by human rights lawyers, quangocrats, rather than elected politicians. And you've seen the power of the Prime Minister diminish, the power of Parliament diminish, and instead, unelected, unaccountable bodies are in charge. So that is the revolution that we need to achieve in Britain. I do think it's bigger and it's deeper than possibly any other bureaucracy in the world. But I think unless we take it on, and unless we are prepared to tell the truth about what's wrong in our country, things will not happen. So today, I'm delighted to be talking to John Solomon, who is a freedom fighter in the United States of America. He has called out the deep state. He's called out the mainstream media. He was cancelled himself. And now he's come back fighting even more strongly for the values we all believe in. Free speech, Christian values, the nation state, the very basis of the revolution that's happening here in America. I'm delighted to have him on the show, and I'm delighted to be working with him on the Liz Truss Show overall. Well, John, it's fantastic to have you on the Liz Truss Show.
Great to be here.
Talking about the Trump revolution.
Yeah.
And we've been through just how bad things in Britain are. And people are feeling very, very depressed. Yeah. But when I come to America, I feel this energy and I feel the sense that the side of righteousness is fighting back.
Yeah.
And what I want to understand from you is you look at our situation in Britain. How solvable do you think it is?
Yeah.
And what can we learn from what you went through as part of the MAGA movement and the Trump revolution?
Well, the first lesson is that we're inextricably intertwined, even in this Trump adventure, because really Brexit in 1516 and Donald Trump are intertwined. The concerns about mass migration that drove the Brexit movement. And by the way, a lot of Americans were involved in that, people like Steve Bannon and my old mentor, Bernie Marcus, who was a big funder of that. The frustration that drove Brexit was the frustration that drove the original Trump movement, that what we saw as the common sense mores of Western society felt like they were being stripped from us right underneath our feet, and we weren't going to take it. And I think Brexit succeeded. It sort of gave us a sense that Donald Trump might succeed too. He succeeds. And then chaos, unleashed by the deep state, by the leftists, basically derailed a lot of the potential progress that either movement could have made. And so, Donald Trump's journey, 21 to 24, he has to fight through lawfare, prosecution, censorship. And those of us who had truth to tell, even if you weren't in the MAGA movement, but you had truth to tell, you got censored if it wasn't part of the official narrative. So, the FBI could tell you, look you in the eye, like they did to me. They looked me in the eye, the Biden FBI saying, we think that the coronavirus came from the Chinese lab. And I wrote that and they censored me. But it's true. It doesn't matter. You're censored. We had to fight through all that. And it was unclear whether we would succeed. In fact, there were days where I was really wondering whether the profession I was in was about to be exterminated, that there would only be one official narrative and you couldn't contest it anymore. We had some lucky things happen. We had some intentional things happen. I think the three most important elements of the return of Donald Trump are, one, Donald Trump's tenacity, his skill set, his ability to bowl over even the most extraordinary opposition. No political person in my lifetime comes close to his skill set. And no political person of an earlier era could have survived what Donald Trump did. I don't think Reagan could have made it through what Trump did. He was too much nice guy. It took a really hard-nosed, tough, brass-knuckles guy to fight through what the left put at him. So you got to have a Donald Trump. Then you have to have an alternate and equal communication system because the left controls the legacy systems. So in America, it was NPR, PBS, the New York Times, the Washington Post.
We've got the BBC, which is even worse. They are a state-funded propaganda outfit. They are absolutely terrible.
I watch what they cover in America. Like, that's not what happened here. I just was there. But you have to have that. And I think one of the wisest things that the conservative funders in the United States did, people like Bernie Marcus before his death and Dick Uihlein, many others, they realized that a communication system had to be built and they invested in it.
Yeah.
And that system rose to, prominence in 1617. So that when Russia collusion came along, we could start to tell people, no, that's not the truth. And we ultimately won. When Hunter Biden came along and we were censored and kicked out, we could prove that it was true. But we created a communications infrastructure that could get around the legacy media and get the word out. Because if you can't get the facts out, there is no opportunity. You learned that the hard way.
I've learned it.
You had the facts on your side.
I learned it real time.
You did?
I learned it real time.
Yeah, no, you're the perfect.
I knew they were bad. It's just like I knew the deep state was bad.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize quite how evil they were and how much they would just tell lies.
Yeah.
Tell absolute lies.
Truth.
And I was shocked by that. I was shocked by that.
Yeah. There is no doubt that, we have a media system in the Western world now that doesn't care about truth. In fact, in many ways, it's the perpetrator against truth. It is waged a war on truth. We had a great example just this week here in America. The Washington Post writes a story saying that Pete Hegseth said he saw the two guys floating on the boat after the first strike on a drug boat and said, kill them all. That is an extraordinary story if it's true, except it turns out not to be true. How do we know it's not true? The admiral who ordered the strike said Pete Hegseth didn't tell me. It didn't happen. That's not what happened. The guys got back in the boat. Looks like they were going to take the rest of the drugs. We blew them out of the water. That's the Washington Post. They gave us Watergate and for many years chronicled Washington fairly accurately. In America today, truth in the mainstream media doesn't seem to matter very often. And they were wrong about Russia collusion, wrong about Hunter Biden, wrong about Joe Biden and his mental acuity. So having that equal and opposite system is the second component. The third component, and I think it's really important in America particularly, but it's probably true anywhere in the world now, you have to have a ground game to win politics. The left is in they have created an entire nonprofit infrastructure that
Correct.
The moment one election begins, they've started the next.
And also, they're being funded by the Soros institutions, but also they were being funded by USAID.
No doubt.
So we actually had things like the Tony Blair Institute being given American tax dollars money. And, you know, it was internationalized.
It was.
And it's interfering in democracies across Europe. It's absolutely, it's a horrific network.
It is.
And I think, you know, going back to what you were talking about, what happened here and the same instincts of the British public, they were frustrated that the elite no longer represented their views because the elite in Britain used to be patriotic. They used to believe in their country. They believed in traditional values. They believed in the family. But since probably the 60s or 70s, we've started getting this new elite who hate all that stuff.
They do.
You know, they now believe in transgender ideology. They believe men can become women. They believe that, you know, the British Empire was a wholly bad thing and we should pay reparations. But, you know, it's kind of crept up on us. And I think a lot of right-wing people or just traditional conservatives, they went off and worked in business and they left this open space of kind of politics, NGOs, and it just got taken over by the left. And then we've both got you call them rhinos, we call them chinos, but the conservatives in name only, who went along with all this. And I remember being told all the time when I was in Parliament and government, Liz, you're on the wrong side of history. You've got to go along with gender self-ID, or you've got to go along with this climate change narrative, or you've got to go along with this, otherwise we'll be seen as out of touch. And they were so worried about what they'd be seen as, not what they actually are. And just people, I can't tell you how angry people in Britain are. And I think they're finally understanding it's not just crap politicians. It definitely is. It's also a whole system that is basically rigged against ordinary people. And we haven't really talked about the economy, but the British economy is in such dire states.
It is.
Poorer than Mississippi. And the people that are benefited are the green energy companies, the corporate banks, these type of people. They live in London, they live in the home counties. They're not living in industrial towns, which have been decimated. And, we started deindustrializing long before you did.
Yeah.
But, steel industry, car industry, disaster. So I think that was the feeling amongst the public that led to Brexit.
Yeah.
And also led to Donald Trump's victory in 2016. But what I know is how powerful and well-funded the opposition are.
Oh, that's a big advantage.
It's about, they just have so much cash. So,
yeah.
And you said there were three things that we needed. So we needed Donald Trump figure.
Right.
I mean, I have pointed out that he does become available in January 2029, which is when the next British election. Can you imagine how much the BBC?
I would love to watch that moment.
It would be so beautiful.
Downing Street would never be the same.
Exactly. So it would be gorgeous. There would be a new ballroom.
There would be a new ballroom, absolutely.
Horse Cars Parade would be closed down, so the new ballroom could be installed. It would be gorgeous. It would be gorgeous. I get the need for a charismatic leader. I get that. I think that on point 3, we do have the groundswell amongst the public.
Yep.
But they're not particularly organized.
That's what it needs to be.
And there isn't the financial resources. I think we benefit hugely from X.
Yep.
Musk has made a massive difference to the British debate. There's a reason why the left in Britain keep trying to cancel him.
Yep.
They can't cancel him because the American money would be cut off. And they kind of know that.
So he's the leading technologist of the world right now. He does things that other people can't even imagine. And so
I wish he'd set up a star base in Britain.
And that'd be amazing.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
That's my ambition. As well as Britain fracking, I want Elon Musk to set up a star base.
You could have a significant fracking industry soon. You said something in your first show, by the way, which was fantastic. Anyone who hasn't seen London is Falling has to see it, because for Americans, it's the looking glass of what the left wants to do here. And we're only a few years behind you in potentially catching up to that disaster. But you said that the vast majority of Brits are too polite and they're more worried about being called a racist than stopping a girl from being a victim of a rapist. And I found that to be such a profound statement. Both cultures have an innate niceness. America and the Brits both come from a Western culture that we're generally good people. We try to be sensible, etc. The left has none of that generosity. It has none of that feeling that they ought to be nice to people. It is win at all costs. And for a period of time, I think Americans and Brits alike did not understand the nature of this new enemy, that there is a leftist for which there are no rules, for which no tactic is off the table, for which there is no politeness required. And I began to see this in the Obama years. The first time I realized it was maybe about 6 months into President Obama's presidency. And there were these young guys that were trying to push my publication to write something that wasn't true. And they would scream and yell at you, and they would drop 25 F-bombs 5 feet from the Oval Office. And I thought, well, what sort of people have we brought into government? This is, we can be.
Sorry, who were these people?
They were senior staffers to President Obama. There was communications staffers, the people who work for the press secretary. And well,
we have those people in Britain. We have this guy, Alistair Campbell, who was the evil apparatchik of Tony Blair.
Yeah.
And he's still spouting off to this day on various podcasts.
Yeah. Well, the tenor was the first warning sign. F-bombs and intimidation and name-calling, ridicule. And then that name-calling and ridicule advanced to censorship, and censorship advanced to prosecution. And as we now have sadly seen with President Trump's 2 assassination attempts and Charlie Kirk's assassination, for some, even murder seems to be on the table. And we, in the civilized rest of the world, who are too busy to think about this because we're just trying to make things meat on the budget and the kitchen table. I don't think we understood that there's this enemy out there that will use Molotov cocktails, bullets, anything to stop the American experience or the British experience from expanding. And so the last few years are an awakening. I think 23 and 24, when they saw the president indicted 3 or 4 times, like, we don't do that. We don't settle our political scores with indictments. This fills banana republic. And the assassinations came along. Those were epic moments, in the generally nice masses of America saying, we're not going to be nice anymore. We're fighting against this.
But if you personally changed your behavior then, how do you fight these people? How do you fight the people who ridicule, cancel, swear, etc., etc.? How do you fight them? To some extent, you have to fight fire with fire.
You do.
That's my view.
The greatest weapon that I have as a communicator, as a journalist, is that I can give facts that they can't stop. Thus far, they've been able to stop. They tried to. I mean, listen, after the Hunter Biden stories in 2019, I was canceled. I was thrown out of my profession, went and started my own company, and I got the facts out. And I'm still doing what I'm doing. And Hunter Biden now is a twice convicted felon, albeit he was pardoned by his father on the way out. But the American people found out that facts mattered. Those 2 IRS whistleblowers came out of the woodwork. When I talk about the communication system, media is a big part of it. What you're doing with your show, I think you're the ground zero of what we began here in 1560 with Breitbart and Just the News.
We better catch up quick.
You have to.
We've got to sort this before 2029.
Yeah, you do. That is your sand clock. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But there's other institutions that we created that the left had co-opted. We never had a whistleblower center on the right. And so the Empower Oversight Whistleblower Center, which I played a role starting, gave us those early FBI whistleblowers and those IRS whistleblowers that forever changed the course of the country. So if you're in Europe, you better create a whistleblower center. We had to create a free speech center. I found Mike Benz.
Yeah.
And Mike Benz helped us understand, and that gave us, Mark and I did the original stories. Then Elon bought Musk a few months after that. Elon has told Mike that our original stories were some of his inspiration. You couldn't believe that was going on. And he does the Twitter files, and Matt Taibbi follows up with that. Yeah. So a center that's dedicated to exposing the intrusion on freedom of speech, because it's first freedom for a reason, is there. And, I look this week, and, every week I can find these insane headlines. And, in Great Britain, a gentleman who came here and posed with a gun while he was on a lawful shooting range in America gets arrested when he goes back home just for holding a gun in a lawful place in America. That's insane.
And this is why while the police are not arresting people for burglary, for rape, for all kinds of other terrible crimes, because they're focused on this and they have been captured.
Yep.
And I think a big issue in Britain that you don't have as badly in America is we've got these so-called independent institutions.
Right.
But what it means is they're answerable to nobody. They're accountable to nobody. They can't be hired and fired. So whereas it used to be the case that police chiefs could be hired and fired by the Home Secretary, that was removed by law.
Yeah.
And so what I worry about is in 2029, when we want to see a counter-revolution, just the sheer pushback we're going to get.
Yeah.
We're going to get it from the likes of the Bank of England. We're going to see it from the police chiefs. They will be saying these people are trying to destroy the rule of law.
Yeah.
They're trying to destroy democracy. How do you get the ballast to fight that? Because this problem has been going on longer in Britain than it has in America. Our state is deeper than yours.
I think.
And we don't, unfortunately, have the level of the Elon Musk entrepreneurs who are prepared to put serious cash into fighting for truth.
I think the rise and fall of Europe will depend on how much Donald Trump himself decides to involve himself in this fight. He's got a big enough fight here trying to fix America and its many ills. But I could imagine, and I'm beginning to see signs of it with our Undersecretary of State for Diplomacy, that we're going to declare war on European insanity. And it will come at an extraordinary cost to Europe. And the truth of the matter is Europe is popped up by a significant amount of American investment in American security. And Donald Trump and send J.D. Vance at the beginning of his administration to send the warning sign, hey, we mean business about this. Clean up the stuff, or in a couple of years, you're going to find out what we're like. I think if Donald Trump can win the 26th election, keep Republicans in control here, and there's some signs that he can. The polling doesn't matter now. No one's deciding polls right now. everybody's still in the rebound of the Biden inflation era and the shutdown, which made people sour for a bit. But the economy will improve next year. The voter rolls are being cleaned up. Half the voter rolls are being cleaned up for the first time in a decade or more, thanks to the Trump Justice Department and Harmeet Dillon. The Supreme Court is going to come down on the side of redistricting for Texas, but not California, probably, because California is retribution and Texas was required by a federal court. The signs are that Donald Trump could defy the normal mid-year election blues and potentially grow. If he does that, my sense in talking to him is he has a great passion in spending the back end of his presidency, not just, he might say it this way because it's the way he talks. I'd love to torture Europe into common sense. But I think he could bring a coalition of businesses that say, we're pulling out. Energy companies, we're pulling out. Forget our money. Forget our security. I'm going to pull some more troops out.
But the problem is, like a government like Keir Starmer's, so we've got the fastest rate of millionaires leaving Britain of any country in the world.
Right.
And he doesn't care.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't care. And the leftists in the Treasury and the Bank of England don't care.
Yeah.
Because they believe in neo-Marxist economics. So they will just say, we don't actually care.
Yeah.
I think there are some things that matter. I think Trump has very effectively used trade policy.
Oh, definitely.
But also security policy.
Yeah.
Because Europe relies on America far too much, in my opinion, for security.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they're playing with the Chinese as well. And we've seen this in Britain. There's a proposal for a mega embassy, a mega Chinese embassy in Britain.
Sure.
That is no doubt going to house a lot of Chinese spies.
Of course.
And
we had them in our fake New York police stations. We fell prey to this during the Biden years. I mean, China ran over Joe Biden in epic ways. I think Donald Trump has, one of the things that a lot of people make a mistake about Donald Trump, they think he's all impulsive, but he's actually got a 4-dimensional chessboard that he plays with. And so when he's looking at things, he's also realizing if I'm going to go hard on Europe, I may also need to push China. China has fears about us. I close the market off here in China. China has no market to itself because it has no middle class. It destroyed its middle class. So keeping China out of Europe while he plays this game will be on his chessboard, I think. He understands the greatest fear that European elitists have is Russia's going to take over the continent. It's not.
It's not.
He can't even defeat Ukraine.
Correct.
But he can lean into that fear in a great way and just move some troops around. He could start building a NATO, and NATO will feel neglected. I think Donald Trump will do, if he can survive the 26th election where he's not being impeached every 5 minutes here, I think he will spend a big part because he understands that Western civilization is sewn together by the American experience and the European experience. And it's only been in the last 10 years where that Western civilization has been threatened from within. But he gets it.
I say the other thing that I think needs to be done is a lot of the problems emanated from the United States.
Yeah.
They emanated from the Democrat Party, Obama.
Yep. Soros.
Can more be done to root that network out in America?
Happening. I don't think a lot of people, again, this is an example of Donald Trump incrementally daily aggregating a really big success story. In just the last 3 months, Donald Trump has drained $500 million out of the coffers of one of the great liberal machinery in America, academia. He is getting these massive settlements out of universities that are bleeding 20, 30, 50, 100, 200, 300, $400 million out of universities. Those giant endowments are shrinking. In addition to why he's doing that, pay me a settlement for what you did to your students, he's cut off all the research funding. He's cut off all the insanity funding, all the transgender funding, all of the DEI funding. He's bleeding institutions that have been at the forefront of the Marxification, the Marxism push.
Where it started in the universities and it's spread.
It always has. Marxism has always started with academia and elitists, and then take the minds of your children. And then a few years ago, I got a chance to interview a Cuban spy. He was in his 80s. He started with Castro. And he ended, and he said, my life had changed. When I started in the beginning, it was Khrushchev and Castro and the Soviets. And by the end of my time, I hung out mostly with Venezuelans, Chinese, and Koreans. And the playbook's been the same my entire 50, 60-year career as a spy. He defected to the United States. I got a chance to talk to him. So I said, what's your playbook? He said, well, it's very simple. First thing is, it's not worth the time of trying to change an older person's mind. So we don't worry about people 30 and above. We prey on the next two generations. Where do you start? We start with academics. And because if you can control and precondition children in school to what they have, they will become political pawns down the stream. The third thing that in his playbook was make the abnormal normal. So, I asked him, does that mean putting a man on the gold medal stand next to a woman and saying he won the women's event? Absolutely what we love. In fact, he said, Cuba plays with all these transgender players right now. We came back from that interview. What did we find? We found a transgender a group in Utah, right near where Charlie Kirk was shot, called the Armed Queers of Salt Lake City. Now, just think about that. In Mormon, Utah, there's a group but do you know where they were this last July before Charlie was shot? They were in Cuba. Our State Department, the Trump State Department, gave them a visa to go to Cuba, and they're consorting with now, the Cubans don't believe in transgenders, but they're glad to foment them on our soil. The abnormal becoming normal was so important. The fourth part of the playbook, he said, was making sure that America was always in a state of conflict. How do you do that? One of the greatest conflict playbooks that the Marxists have had is DEI, CRT, what do you want to call it? Whites are oppressors, everybody else is oppressed. What got routed through our school system for 2 generations? That thing. The final one is always create a sense that America has a crisis coming. Well, let me just think about the last decade. The world was ending with climate change. Russia had...
Amazing how people have shut up about that now, isn't it? They're not talking about it anymore.
Because it was a fraud. It was a ruse.
Well, but they don't hold to account. No one's saying you've wasted billions and billions of taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
You've given all these concessions to China.
That's right.
Which hasn't...
No. The accountability is zero.
There's just no accountability.
The real question will be for us, and this could be a model for conservatives across Europe if Trump succeeds at this. The whistleblowers who turned around the Hunter Biden case are now running the entire IRS. What a turn of events. They now run the whole agency that tried to destroy them.
That's amazing.
They are looking at every nonprofit in America, whether they spent money on things that were not in their charter, in the tax exemption guardrails that they were given. You could not only hold the tax exemptions of those groups, but you could prosecute every leader of a group that decided to spend money on things that wasn't. Just the other day, I had a story. It was a pretty important story. Reid Hoffman, the man who created LinkedIn, one of the largest super donors in the liberal world, particularly in America. The Justice Department just told Congress, we think he's been routing money, dark money, into campaigns, even though it's not supposed to be campaigns. I think that was a fired shot, a warning to all liberal donors across America. We're coming for your nonprofits. We're coming for your laundered donations. We're coming for your foreign money that may have been laundered into the system. If Donald Trump could create a counteroffensive there, he can bleed one advantage that the left has in America over the right, which is money. They spend 2 to 3 times what the right spends on money.
Yeah.
That model would be easily adaptable across Europe. Now, it's not going to happen in Great Britain right away, but Italy and Hungary and other places have NGOs that come through there. The same NGOs are all across Europe. Find their Achilles in those countries, start pulling that money down, lock those people into prosecutions for abusing the tax laws. I think that's going to be the great equalizer on the money side, and it's exportable from America if they succeed at it. We're going to see the first prosecutions probably right after the first year on that front. That's a big deal.
Do you think a lot of these corporates are genuinely gone woke, or is it just because of the political fashion? How many of these people are useful idiots, and how many are actually Marxists?
A lot of the CEOs, because they came out of the school systems, believe the crap that they implemented. I mean, when they redid Cracker Barrel Hero, that CEO was convinced that was the right thing. Anyone who spent 10 minutes at Cracker Barrel knew that was going to be a disaster, and it was a disaster. Anybody who walked into a Target 2 Christmases ago and saw those outrageous displays of transgenderism knew that was not going to fail. But the CEOs didn't see it, so their blindness, their academic indoctrination and blindness left them to make those bad decisions. At the end of the day, they made decisions because they thought, well, that's where millennials are going, and so that's our new marketplace. We're going to go there. And then they realized, well, millennials were there for about 25 minutes, and so they had kids, and then they realized, I don't want my kid, competing against a guy if she's a girl. And so they miscalculated. But the the beauty of those anecdotes is to show you two things. One, the elitists are truly so indoctrinated they can't see reality. And then I think the greatest, and I've said this in every speech I've given the last few years, the greatest Achilles heel that the left has globally is that they think the masses of people that they try to bamboozle are stupid, and we're not. And if ever there was a declaration that the American people said we're not stupid, is what they did in 2024. They did not buy a single argument that Donald Trump is a Russian stooge, a Ukrainian hack, or a 5-time felon or 4-time felon, and they elected him over the elitists. I think the left still doesn't understand that the American people figured it out long before the left realized they had been bamboozled. That is something that if you're trying to defeat the left, you architect your strategy to take advantage of that. The left does not know the masses have figured them out.
I agree with that. Well, we've got a long way to go.
We do.
But I think it's an inspiration what's happened here. Yeah. It's an inspiration for us.
Yeah.
And it shows these people can be beaten.
Yep.
And I'm frankly ashamed if we have to be rescued by America. We need to fight for ourselves.
No.
So
your show is the starter pistol. Oh, I am so excited about it. Someone had to take this playbook and say, we are going to do this in Europe. We are not going to let Europe fall.
We're going to do it.
You fired the starter pistol. Yeah, that last London is Falling last Friday was the starter pistol for me watching it. And I think Donald Trump and Americans will join in this fight. But you're already assembling the masses.
We are assembling the counter-revolution. That's what we're doing.
It's an amazing thing to watch.
Thank you, John.
Good to be with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was a fascinating discussion with John Solomon. He really is a freedom fighter who's been on the front line. He's been cancelled. He's been abused. People have called him all kinds of names, but he's still here and he's still fighting because he understands how important the prize is. This isn't just who wins the next election. This is an existential struggle for our civilization. The values we hold dear are being undermined by the globalist left. As John was saying, these people don't fight in a nice way. They fight dirty. They cancel people. They debank people. They've even assassinated people. The appalling assassination of Charlie Kirk. We are fighting a truly evil force. I thought it was very interesting that John talked about President Trump and how much he cares about this. We've seen it ourselves. He's done 2 visits to Britain this year. He held a press conference at Trump Turnberry where he talked about the violations of freedom of speech, the mass migration crisis in Britain. He even defended British farmers against the inheritance tax that Keir Starmer is trying to impose. We've also seen the State Department and Sarah Rogers issue warnings to the United Kingdom that we are on the wrong track, along with many European countries. I believe that the way the MAGA movement, the way the independent media in the United States have managed to turn around what was a terrible situation. They were against the entire American establishment. They were against Hollywood. They were against the tech elite. They were against the bankers. And many of these factions are now coming on side with the MAGA revolution. They're beginning to understand what the existential struggle we face really is. So this gives me hope that we can have a counter-revolution in Britain, that all is not lost, that we have friends and allies in the United States, and we also have a way of achieving the results. But the biggest lesson, I think, from today's discussion is that we have to take the gloves off. We can't be nice anymore. We can't try and appease these people anymore. We can't try and go halfway. How can you go halfway to saying a man can become a woman or we need to abolish all fossil fuels? You simply can't compromise with these people. They're out to end Western civilization. We're out to defend it. And that's what we need to do. So thank you very much for joining me on the Liz Truss Show, and welcome to the Counter Revolution.